Before I read this reading that Deron asked to be shared today, I have to get something off my chest. And that is that Deron and I engaged in several athletic competitions against each other many times, most weekends when we were in college. And we had somewhat of a gentleman's agreement that we would not focus on the win-loss record because, after all, we had to return home where my now wife was waiting for both of us. It was very important to me that I make a good impression upon my return. So we did not focus on wins and losses, but I want to tell you today that I have been beaten badly by Deron Arnold in all of those athletic competitions, more so than when I won. And I know, along with most of you, I spent time with Deron in his frailty. But all I have and all I remember and all I received from him was strength. And Dawn, you're wrong. The whole thing is hard. Deron asked that a reading from C.S. Lewis's book, The Last Battle, be given, and the song Further Up and Further In by Jacob's Trouble follow. The Last Battle is the last book of the Chronicles of Narnia series. Unlike other great battles in children's literature, the last battle of the last king of Narnia was a hopeless one. It happened in the black of night, outside a dark, old, foreboding stable that had been turned into the enemy's stronghold. Our heroes were hopelessly outnumbered and fought with inferior weapons, but fought they did, scratching and clawing for each breath, for the light of day, in hopes that at some moment Aslan, the great lion and redeemer of Narnia, would intervene. Tirian, the last king of Narnia, fought the bloody battle all through the night until the enemy pinned him and his comrades against the doorway of the stable. Utterly spent, and knowing that the door had become his last and only option, he plunged himself through the doorway of the awful stable. But rather than doom, he found himself in the presence of Aslan himself, standing next to the doorway of the stable, which, from the other side, appeared to be a doorway standing in midair, a window into all of Narnia. The doorway had led him into Aslan's country, the new Narnia, which is where our reading begins. They had seen strange things enough through that doorway, but it was stranger than any of them to look around and find themselves in warm daylight. The blue sky above them, flowers at their feet, and laughter in Aslan's eyes. He turned swiftly around, crouched lower, lashed himself with his tail, and shot away like a golden arrow. "Come further in, come further up," he shouted over his shoulder. But who could keep up with him at that pace? The difference between the old Narnia and the new Narnia was that the new one was a deeper country. Every rock and flower and blade of grass looked as if it meant more. I can't describe it any better than that. If you ever get there, you will know what I mean. It was the unicorn who summed up what everyone was feeling. He stamped his right forehoof on the ground and neighed, and then cried, "I have come home at last. This is my real country. I belong here. This is the land I have been looking for all my life, though I never knew it until now." The reason why we loved the old Narnia is that it sometimes looked a little like this. Come further up, come further in. He shook his mane and sprang forward into a great gallop, a unicorn's gallop, which in our world would have carried him out of sight in a few moments. But now a most strange thing happened. Everyone else began to run, and they found, to their astonishment, that they could keep up with him. If one could run without getting tired, I don't think one would often want to do anything else. Don't stop. Further up, further in, called Farsight the eagle, tilting his flight upward. Further up and further in, roared the unicorn, and no one held back. They charged straight at the foot of a hill and then found themselves running up it almost as water from a broken wave runs up a rock out at the point of some bay. Though the slope was nearly as steep as the roof of a house and the grass was as smooth as a bowling green, no one slipped. Only when they had reached the very top did they slow up. That was because they found themselves facing great golden gates, and for a moment none of them was bold enough to try if the gates would open. They all felt just as they had felt about the fruit they had tasted when they had come through. Dare we? Is it right? Can this be meant for us? But while they were standing thus, a great horn, wonderfully loud and sweet, blew from somewhere inside that walled garden, and the gate swung open. Tyrion, the king, stood holding his breath and wondering what would come out. And what came was the last thing he had expected. A little, sleek, bright-eyed talking mouse with a red feather stuck in a circlet on its head and its left paw resting on a long sword. It bowed a most beautiful bow and said in a shrill little voice, "Welcome in the lion's name. Come further up and further in." And as Aslan himself began to speak, he no longer looked to them like a lion. But the things that began to happen after that were so great and beautiful that I cannot write them. And for us, this is the end of all the stories. And we can most truly say that they all lived happily ever after. But for them, it was only the beginning of the real story. All their life in this world and all their adventures in Narnia had only been the cover and the title page. Now at last they were beginning chapter 1 of the great story, which no one on earth has read, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before. The author of Hebrews captures a similar thought, and no doubt C.S. Lewis probably had it in mind when he wrote the last chapter of The Last Battle. So I would like to close this reading with Hebrews 11:13 through 16. All these people were still living by faith when they died, as Deron was. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance. And they admitted that they were aliens and strangers on earth, as Deron did. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own, as Deron was. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one, as Deron was. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. God is not ashamed to be called Deron Arnold's God, and he has prepared a city for Deron. Friends, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, then share in the joy of knowing that Deron is now running faster than the wind in his true country. Amen. Now, as Dave brings us further up and further in by Jacob's trouble, let's meditate. Thank you.